Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for attending this awareness training course on fire safety for tenants. My name is Michael James Kelly from the Fire Safety Department. First of all, I want to tell you that it's so important that everybody in the mall has responsibility for fire safety. It's important for you, it's important for me, it's important for you to understand that it's your safety that is paramount within the Dubai Mall and the safety of the customers. And what's important here today is that we carry out this fire safety awareness to ensure that you understand and identify the risks that could be within your workplace. So after this session, I want to show you that we'll be giving out a tenants awareness book. Also, at the end of the session, we'll be giving out an evacuation pouch. Both these will be explained in the presentation. Within the presentation, we'll be looking at the fire triangle. What causes a fire? We'll also be looking at how does a fire spread in the shops. We'll look at the fire alarm system that's within your tenant's area, and we'll also be looking at the fire evacuation pouch. Also, we'll be looking at means of escape, occupant responsibility, smoke and sprinkler systems, just very short brief on that, testing of fire systems, causes of fire, which are very important, sources of ignition that cause these fires, combustible materials, and the importance of keeping fire doors closed, and what action you can take in case of fire. The first thing I want to show you though is a video. I want to show how important and how quickly a fire can spread in a building. You may be surprised how fast this fire shows on this video, but what I do want to tell you is that there has been no accelerants put on this. This is a real video with real materials that you could find anywhere, and maybe especially at Christmas time within a shop. I just want to show you how quickly a fire can develop. If you look at this video, you can see how quickly that fire has developed, and look at the thick black smoke that's started to hit the ceiling and start to come down. This could be a shop that you may be in. And what's important here is to reduce that risk and not allow the two elements that make up a fire, the three elements of a triangle that make up the fire that mix with the oxygen. Look at the time, less than 36 seconds. You could be in a back room of your retail, maybe having a cup of tea or doing some stock taking, and within that time, a fire could develop that much. So I want you to realise that, and I want you to show how important it is to carry out this training. So, what makes a fire? Well, let's just have a look. We have what's called the fire triangle. It needs three elements. It needs the fuel, it needs the heat, and it needs the oxygen. If we remove any one of those three out of the element, we won't have a fire. But we need to put that into practice, so let's just look at that. For removal of the fuel, what do we mean by fuel? We mean combustible material, we mean paper, we mean plastics, we mean cardboard, wood. This is the fuel, okay? If we remove the fuel from an ignition source, or say a heat lamp, if it's away from it, you won't have a fire. Look at the second one. If we remove the heat source, which could be a gas, it could be electric, it could be a heat lamp, it could be matches, it could be ignition source of a lighter. If they're close to any combustibles and you put the two together with the oxygen, you're going to have a fire. Again, we have to keep the distance away. And in respect of the electrical or an ignition source, we can either turn an ignition source off or we can remove it completely away. If we remove it, we lose the triangle of combustion. And finally, oxygen. Not as easy to get rid of because it's everywhere within the building. However, there are occasions, if you look at any CO2 extinguisher, a CO2 extinguisher actually smothers and removes the oxygen from the base of the fire. By doing that, what it does is it excludes the oxygen, which breaks the triangle of combustion. Another method is when people use a fire blanket and cover over a fire that's developing. Again, it excludes the oxygen. So there's three different elements there. You remove one of the elements and you won't have a fire. Now I want to show you this element in respect of the chip pan. Before I show this video, why it's so important to understand what extinguishers to use is quite simply this. You put the wrong extinguisher on, you could have a serious fire. And this may be not necessarily in your shop, but if you work in food and beverage, it's very important that you realize what water can do to an oil pan that's full of hot oil. And secondly, what I want to show is I'll stop the video halfway through just to show you an element that you may not be aware of. If you notice there, he's put a cloth over it. Now what that will do is that will exclude the oxygen from the pan, and eventually it will break the triangle of combustion, as we can see here. But once he removes the cloth, what you will see is you will notice that the oxygen mixes again with the hot oil and the heat ignition from the cooker itself, and what you have is the triangle of combustion has come back. Okay? So there's the triangle of combustion that is now complete with the fire. Now if you look here, you've got this very, very small amount of water. Very small. Just watch what happens. I'm going to stop the video. Now, if you look how much the size of the flame that created, if you look at the two parallel lines just above the door, that actually represents the ceiling. So can you imagine that fire developing and hitting the ceiling? Where's it going to go? It's going to go right back in you and fill that room. The two parallel lines represent the ceiling of maybe your apartment or maybe your food and beverage outlet. So it's very important you understand you cannot mix water with hot fats and oils. Okay, now I want to talk about is when you see on the television a large fire, why does it become so big? Well, the reason for that is because it spreads. The fire spreads, and it spreads in three different ways. And the first way is radiation. When you walk out of here today and outside, you'll feel the heat of the sun. Okay? A fire is very similar. A fire will develop, and if you get close enough to a fire, you'll suddenly feel the heat and you'll step back. And that's important. You'll feel the radiated heat. But if you were to constantly stay there or put another piece of combustible material, that radiated heat will eventually ignite that other source. And so the fire spread from the original source to the next source, and so on. And it moves on like that to spread the fire within a shop or within a building. It's very important. So that's radiated heat. The second way, as you saw in that first video, the fire hit the ceiling, it had nowhere to go, and it had to convect and go around the ceiling and mushroom round and go down the sides of the ceiling. What you must remember is that thick black smoke is hot gas. Hot gas and smoke at very high temperatures. So with the high temperature, it will hit any combustible material that it comes across and can ignite that material. So there is another way of fire spreading. As it hits the ceiling, it spreads out, and anything in its way that's combustible at the high temperatures, you have this high ignition source and you have the combustible material, you have a fire. And this is how it spreads within a building. Finally, conduction. I know I'm using the analogy of a pan, but if you were to hold the metal handle of a pan and leave it on a gas or electric ring for long enough, if you hold it, you'll feel the pain of the heat through your hand. And if you keep holding it, you'll end up getting blisters. So you're burning your hand. Well, let's just take that into a building, a modern building. All the buildings are constructed of steel girders, and it works in exactly the same way. What happens is a fire develops, it brings down the ceilings, and it starts to expose the steel beams. Once the heat is applied to the steel beams, it conducts that heat as simply as it conducts it on a pan. And so any heat that's transferred, if there's any combustible surrounding that steel girder, then eventually, with the heat and the rising temperature, it will eventually ignite that combustible material around the steel girder. And this can happen in the room of the fire origin, or it can actually happen in another room, because steel girders can spread over a long distance, maybe 20, 30 meters in length. And so you have this conduction that passes through, and that is one of the reasons how fire spreads in a building. Also, let's look at this particular picture here. Remember, we're not always living, we're living in multi-story buildings, and in multi-story buildings we have fire escape staircases. But what's very important if you look in this picture is that what you can see here is you can see a fire developing in maybe a storeroom that hasn't been kept shut by a fire door, or other doors being wedged open, and these are the things that you see in your workplace all the time. You see doors wedged open that are fire doors. You see doors tied by the handle to hold back, all because you want to make it easier to get in and out of the door. But what you don't understand is a fire door is a very, very important element to stop the spread of fire. You have a fire door, it will stop fire and smoke from passing through for a minimum of 30 minutes. A minimum, most other fire doors can be up to 60 minutes. So you have all that time to escape if you have it behind a fire door. But in this picture here, what we can see here is that we see doors being left open, which quite clearly allows the convection of heat and hot gases and fire to spread throughout the building. Once it spreads throughout the building, the final door onto the emergency staircase, that's being wedged open. If that wedged open, then the people on the upper floors, what are they going to do? How are they going to get out? So it's up to you to see in your building this, any doors that are wedged open that you see as fire doors. You now know through this training, hopefully, that you will now know that fire doors are an important element, not only to keep the fire back, but to protect you if you're on an upper floor in a building where your only means of escape is down that staircase. So it's very important. And so when you're here today listening to this and seeing how fire develops very quickly and how fire spreads, I want you to pass that word to your colleagues. I want you to pass it to everybody you know, because you are the eyes and ears for the Dubai Mall. And it's important for you and for and all the other malls, it's important for you to identify these issues, and either, if you see a wedge in a door, take the wedge out and let the door shut, because you now know how important that door is. But if we see this as it progresses, what we have here is we have the fire developing rapidly, and then once it gets into the staircase, the hot gases and smoke will rise naturally, and what does it do to the people up in the upper floors? It traps them. So it's very important that everybody looks after everybody else's safety, and everybody looks at everybody else's risks and tries to avert or eliminate them risks. These are simple actions that you can do. You can remove wedges from doors. You can remove handles tied back with string or rope or whatever. You can do all that, and that will contain a fire. And the reason why you should do that is because if a fire happens in a small store and you close that door, or that door's shut on that store, then that might be the difference between saving the rest of the shop because the fire's been contained in that storeroom. But if you've left the door open and you've allowed it to spread, then who knows, you could destroy the shop. You might come back the next day, the owner might not be able to employ you because there's no stock left, he has to recoup his business, and you might be out of a job. So it's more than just looking at the fire risk and the fire safety. It's looking after your safety, the customer's safety, and the continuous business continuity that it will help with. Let's look at, again, looking at enclosed spaces. Most of your tenants' areas are enclosed spaces. They're basically rectangular shapes, if another word for it really. And what you see is when a fire develops, it develops in that small unit. Sometimes you have larger anchor tenants, but the principle's still the same. Your fire develops, it starts to rise. Now, if you're given fire extinguisher training as part of the UAE code, and 10% of all staff should be trained, of all tenants should be trained in fire extinguisher training, you might have a small fire that develops there, and you may be able to put it out. And if you do, you've just actually saved the shop and saved any damage. If it's not possible to put the fire out, then what happens is, as you can see here from the 3 pictures, is that the fire begins to develop. Again, it hits the ceiling and convects around the ceiling and starts to drop down until it fully encloses the shop with smoke. And that's important why we have our detections in there, our sprinklers in there, for that reason. Because when it fills with smoke, one, you won't be able to see where you're going. You won't be able to get out. We don't want to be at that stage with a total room full of smoke. We want to be able to identify these fires early on, and either through your training or your quick action might avert having a fire that fills the whole of the shop. Another thing that I see a lot of that's important for you to recognise is that many shops either on fit out or have been refurbished, or maybe they just additionally want a monitor or something, or a new sound system to enhance their shop when people are shopping around. That's fine, there is no problem with that. But what people forget is they bring new cables in through the fire resisting walls. And the walls that are made fire resistant are very similar to a fire door. They keep back the fire and the smoke. Unfortunately, that when they put the cables in, they leave large holes. And as you just saw in that last picture, smoke will find all these holes and will spread the fire. So it's very important that if you're going to break cables through fire-resisting walls, then you should seal them up, as can be seen on the picture on the right, with fire intumescent material that stops the fire and the smoke spreading into either the next shop or the next section of your shop. And that's another way of limiting fire spread. So it's very important to identify if you've got lots of holes in your ceiling or above your ceiling, you need to have them fire stopped. Fire alarm systems. The whole point of fire alarm system is if you've got your shop and your fire alarm system is working, that's key to giving warning to you at the very early stages of a fire. Not at the stage that we saw in that video where it was filling the whole room with smoke very quickly, but very quickly it can give you a warning to start to move. But what happens? What do I see very often in fire alarms when the fire alarms go off? You know, you've heard it yourself. When a fire alarm goes off, what happens? You turn to the other person, you say, is that the fire alarm? Do you think we should move? Do you think we should go? I don't see anybody else moving. That's key. You're all doing the same thing. You're all just standing there, not knowing whether to go because you cannot see the fire. But what you must remember is that fire might be developing either below you, in another room below, or in another floor. And you've just seen the very first video how fast that fire can spread. So for you to discuss, you're losing your valuable time. You must act quickly. When the alarm goes off, you must start to move. Okay? And when you do move, especially in a tenant shop, it's important for you to utilize your fire evacuation plan, which is inside this pouch, and identify that everybody is cleared out of the shop, and you can place your sticker on the window of the shop to show that everyone's cleared out from your shop when you're doing your evacuation process. And it's important for you to carry out your evacuation procedures. You don't necessarily always have to set the alarm off. You can literally just have an action and shout fire, and then just see if everybody does what they're supposed to do as part of your evacuation plan. So it's very important that you follow the procedures that are outlined in the evacuation pouch with the sticker, which we'll go through in a short while. So as the alarm goes off, you must make your way immediately to the fire exit. So know your fire exits. So in the evacuation pouch, you'll find that you have the map for the assembly points, you'll have your all clear sticker, and you'll have a 10-point checklist to ensure that ensure that people are all out safely and you've not missed anybody, and also security of your shop. There is 10 simple guidelines for tenants evacuation, which you can read in your evacuation pack as you take it when you leave the premises today with your handbook. There are 10 points which are clearly identified for you to look at and to follow, and to go back to your tenants and go back to your staff and to go through these and do some evacuation procedure. Your all clear sticker is there, and your map to show you the assembly point when you leave your actual tenants area and you move into the main common mall area, and where you should go from them. Means of escape, very, very important. There is no point in trying to escape from a burning fire to find that your exit is blocked because of either stock or combustible materials or refuge or anything else that blocks your escape. And again, I'll refer back to that first video. 45 seconds it took for that fire to fill that room. When you go back to your tenant's area, have a look at your fire escape. Have a look at your means of escape out the back. Tell me if you've got a load of boxes or storage or goods in front of your exit. You tell me if you can remove them in less than 45 seconds before being caught out in smoke. You need to make sure that your exit routes are clearly kept clear and always available and not locked. Because if you've got a key in there and you're trying to find it, or someone's removed the key, and again I'll refer back to that fire 45 seconds, you tell me how you're going to find that key. Very difficult. Make sure your escape routes, your final escape from your shop is available at all times that you're in the shop, and make sure it's clear and unobstructed so that you can clearly and freely get through your escape route without having to climb over anything, trip over other people because there's obstacles in the way. That's definitely not allowed. And part of the UAE fire code is that you must keep your fire exits clear, and that includes the back of house. So now you're aware of this, I want to make sure that you go back there and you look for that. And if you find it, or you find someone else is blocking the exit from another shop, then just report it and we'll get it moved, because it's your safety that counts. And it's also the safety of the customers who may have to use that same escape route if we do have a fire in the mall. Again, it's important that you help each other to escape. Do not use the lifts. Please use the staircases. They are the safe places, and they should be the safe places. So if you ever see storage in your staircase, then get it reported and get it moved, because that is supposed to be a place of safety, not a place where a fire should start. Know your exits out of the building and know your assembly points. Very important, so that if you do enough times on the procedures and you practice, it'll become second nature to you. You have to become fire safety aware. It's very, very important for you and for the customer and for everybody that's in the mall. Something that you may not be necessarily understand that much, but I want to point it out to you how important these systems are. In the larger anchor tenants, they will have systems called smoke control systems that help to control the smoke and draw the smoke out of the building and not do what we saw in the first video, fill the whole room full of smoke. So it's very important that them systems work. The second thing that you see there is sprinkler systems. Now, they're in every single shop, and they're very, very important. Next time you go into your tenant's area, have a look up at the ceiling and look at the little white disc that you find in the roof of the ceiling. That is where what happens is the fire develops, it drops that disc, and your sprinkler pops out and actuates, and then you have water, which ultimately will control the fire. What I want you to do is be aware that many ceilings have been painted, and when they paint, they actually add more adhesion to the actual disc, which means it might not work properly. So if you have painted your ceiling, that's fine, but ensure that the disc is free from paint and ensure that it can still operate and will drop as it's supposed to do at a certain temperature. But the very important sprinklers and smoke control, they will protect you and give you time to escape out of a fire if they're working correctly. So just check all your sprinkler discs and ensure that your smoke control is working in your tenant's area. Now, there is different systems of maintenance for all these different systems, and that's understandable, and you will have a third party possibly coming in to check your system. But it doesn't mean to say that you can't be alert and ensure that one day you may walk in, you might find there's a buzzer coming from the alarm. Then report it, because there could be a fault on the system that needs to be fixed immediately. It could be that normally a healthy fire alarm system will have a green light. Maybe it's showing red. Highlight that to your manager or report it yourself, because it could be that the fire alarm system might have just gone defective and it needs someone to fix it. But unfortunately, if you just leave it, then you won't be having your early warning in case of fire. So we could go back to that same situation where a fire could develop and you're unaware of that fire developing in another room, or you're in a back room and it starts in the main room. So very, very important. So please ensure that all your fire alarm systems are maintained and tested. Ensure that there is at least a logbook that shows all the testing, and all your break glasses are working as per the manufacturer's recommendations. Causes of fire. Some of the major causes of fire are careless use of smoking and matches, and just dropping your cigarette end close to some combustible material. Misuse of electricity, overloading. One of the biggest causes of fire is overloading. You're taking too much demand off the plug socket and it heats up, and the more it heats up, any combustibles around it or even the plastic and the wiring will cause a fire. Improper rubbish disposal, you know what I've said before, in the means of escape corridors or next to heaters or next to heat lamps. These are all the issues, all the areas that could cause a fire. Storage of flammables. You shouldn't have any storage of flammables within your area. If it does, it contributes very quickly to a fire. And be wary of arson. Sometimes, you know, you may have a disgruntled employee who you might have to fire, you might have to get rid of. Sometimes a person feels like getting back on somebody, and you may have issues of that, so just be wary. There's a number of sources of ignition. You've seen them every day: electric ovens, gas ovens, matches, candles, light fittings, heaters, sparks from workmen's tools, welding equipment, and, as I said there, overloading sockets. They're all natural parts of what you see every day. What you must do is ensure that you don't have that triangle complete. You don't have these ignition sources next to your combustible materials. So as we see here in the two pictures, you have a naked light and you've got paper. Put them together with the oxygen, you've got your chances of a fire. If the candle was to knock over, it could end up igniting the combustible material. Again, it shows a heater. It shows badly stored refuge with plastics. Plastics are very, very toxic when they give off the smoke. It's very toxic, and that would create a very large fire if there was a heat source too close to it. So I want you to take on board what you've seen today and go and have a look at your shop, and go and have a look at what materials you've got in your shop, and whether you've got them too close to heaters or whether you've got them blocking your exit doors. It's important for you. You are the eyes and ears to help us. As I mentioned at the very beginning, and you saw in them two pictures showing the fire and smoke spreading through the building and up through the staircase, fire doors are brilliant at keeping the fire back. A fire door that's built properly, a proper fire door, will hold back a fire for a minimum of 30 minutes. So you shouldn't have to panic and rush out. If you close that door, it will hold that fire back. So be very careful. And wherever you see a fire door keep shut, that sign on it, it's saying it for a reason. It's asking you to keep this door shut because it will contain a fire from one end of one department area to another department area, from one shop area to another shop area. Very, very important. And finally, actions before there is a fire. Know your evacuation procedure. Know your exit routes. The location of your break glass call points within your retail area. Ensure you know where they are so you can make a quick response if you see a fire developing. Ensure that you know your exits. Ensure you look after anybody that's disabled in there. Think about it. If a person comes into your tenants area in a wheelchair and there was a fire, let's say, at the front of the shop where they've come in, can you make sure that they can get out the back of the shop through the exit door, or is it full of combustible material, or is it full of stored goods, which makes the passage narrow? So have a look and see if you can see that, and if you can, make a change, clear it up and make a change. When you do evacuate, ensure you look for the role of the floor wardens, because they will be evacuating on a zone by zone basis. So look which way you need to evacuate from when you come out the shop, as they're an integral part of the incident response team. Finally, all I want to show you is this extinguisher video. What you'll see in this video is you'll see two types of extinguisher, in red and in black, because in some areas and in some cases they still use, red and a different colour. In some cases they will use the two standards. The extinguishers are still both the same and can operate, but the new standard is that nearly all extinguishers tend to be red, but CO2 remains black at the moment. But I want to show you this video.
When firefighters are called out, they never know what to expect. They could be called out to a false alarm or to a fire like this. Learning to cope with such a variety of calls takes years of training and experience. However, if you should come across a fire, it'll probably be your first. Take a burning chip pan, a common fire in the home and one that's easily dealt with. But if you tackle it in the wrong way, this will happen to you. Now you can appreciate why you need to know the correct way to tackle a fire. And that's what we'll be showing you in this video. Before a fire can start, three things have to be present. Fuel, the thing that actually burns. Oxygen, which is all around us. And of course, a source of ignition. Put these three things together and you will have fire. Well, that's simple enough, but now we've got a fire, how do we put it out? Well, if we remove the heat, the fuel or the oxygen, surely the fire must go out. Let's have another look at our chip pan. Well, the simplest way to put out this fire is to smother it with a damp cloth or a fire blanket. By removing the oxygen, the fire goes out. And of course, remember to turn off the source of heat. We can also put out a fire by turning off the fuel. But the most common way is to simply remove the heat by using water. Now, you probably won't have buckets of water lying around in your workplace, but you will have fire extinguishers. So let's see what's available and how they work.
The most common type is the water extinguisher. It's usually coloured red, and it should only be used on solid materials like wood, paper and textiles. These are called Class A fires. To use it, first break the security tag. Remove the safety pin, hold the hose and strike the handle. Test the extinguisher and, starting at the base of the fire, move the jet from side to side. As the fire begins to go out, work the jet across the surface. Remember, a water extinguisher should never be used on electrical apparatus or flammable liquid fires. To recap then, the water extinguisher is usually red, should only be used on small Class A fires, and should never be used on electrical apparatus or flammable liquid fires. Foam extinguishers. These are normally coloured either red or cream. Red foam extinguishers may have a small cream-coloured section on the extinguisher. These are suitable for Class A solid fires or for flammable liquids like petrol or diesel. These are called Class B fires. To use the extinguisher, remove the tag and pin. Strike the handle and test before tackling the fire. If the fire is contained, aim at the back wall of the container so that the foam runs down and spreads over the burning liquid. For an uncontained fire, aim the foam into the air, allowing it to fall directly onto the fire. Some foam extinguishers have spray nozzles. These are always used in the same way, by aiming directly at the fire. So that's the foam extinguisher, usually red or cream. It may have either a jet or spray nozzle and can be used on Class A solid fires or Class B flammable liquid fires, but must never be used on electrical apparatus. Dry powder extinguishers are either red or blue in colour. Red dry powder extinguishers may have a blue section on the extinguisher. They can be used on most types of fire, including Class A solids and Class B liquids. They can also be used on fires involving gas, known as Class C fires, and on electrical fires. Once the tag and pin are removed, strike the handle and test. This extinguisher is very effective and puts out most fires quickly. The powder should be aimed directly at the flames, but this may obscure the fire. To help overcome this problem, quick short bursts can be used until the operator is within range of the fire. If gas is involved, remember, never put out the fire unless the supply can be turned off straight away. A gas leak is extremely dangerous. Never approach a cylinder alight if you do not know how long it has been burning. So remember, dry powder extinguishers are usually red or blue and can be very effective on electrical and classes A, B and C fires. The powder should be aimed at the flames, but this may obscure the fire. Carbon dioxide extinguishers are usually red or black. Red carbon dioxide extinguishers may have a black section on the extinguisher. They can be used on contained liquid fires and on fires involving gas or electricity. To use the extinguisher, remove the tag and pin. Position the discharge horn and test. On a contained liquid fire, aim the extinguisher away from the flames and then sweep over the surface of the burning liquid. Remember to always hold the extinguisher upright or it will not work. On electrical fires, turn off the supply first, but only if it is safe to do so. Carbon dioxide extinguishers put out fires quickly and without any mess, but it's noisy and very cold. This can cause cold burns. If the fire occurs in a small room or cupboard, fight the fire from outside. The main points again on carbon dioxide extinguishers. They're usually red or black. They can be used on contained liquid fires and on gas or electrical fires. It's clean to use but noisy, and some parts get very cold in use. Wet chemical extinguishers. This is a new type of extinguisher for use on cooking oil fires. These are called Class F fires. Most are coloured silver, but some may be coloured red with a small yellow section. To use the extinguisher, remove the tag and pin and test. Aim the nozzle directly towards the fire. Remember to empty all of the contents of the extinguisher onto the fire, as this will seal it and prevent the fire from reigniting. So remember, wet chemical extinguishers are usually red or silver, are suitable for Class F cooking fires, and the entire contents of the extinguisher should be applied to the fire.
It's very important to use the right type of extinguisher. So let me simplify it for you.
For solid Class A fires, use water, foam or dry powder. On flammable liquid Class B fires, use foam, dry powder or carbon dioxide. On fires involving gas Class C fires, use dry powder or carbon dioxide. On electrical fires, use carbon dioxide or dry powder. And finally, on cooking oil Class F fires, use a wet chemical extinguisher. But no matter which extinguisher you use, remember these points. Sound the alarm before tackling the fire. Ensure someone calls the fire service. Test the extinguisher before use. Always leave yourself a way out. Extinguishers should only be used on small fires. Finally, never put yourself at risk. And if you still don't know why extinguisher training is so important, just think, 20 minutes ago, someone could have put out this fire with an extinguisher.
So as you can see there, that was an introduction to extinguishers, just to show how important they are and how important for you to have some training on them so you can put a small fire out before it gets into a large fire. I want to say now that that concludes the tenants awareness. So before you leave, can you make sure that you do pick up your tenants awareness book and your evacuation pouch, and please ensure that if there is a number of you from the same retail shop, then please just take one for the time being until we'll give them out to all the tenants. If there are any surplus, then we're quite happy to deliver them to your tenants area. But I do hope that you go away with one, remembering how fast a fire can spread, and also greater awareness now about fire. And please, please go back to your tenants areas, look at maybe some risks that you may have in there that you can quickly eliminate now that you understand about fire. It could be the fire doors, it could be fire doors held open, fire doors wedged open, it could be combustibles or goods stored blocking your exit. It could be that you have a large combustible materials next to some ignition sources or too close to them ignition sources. It could be that you may go back there and start to understand where your exit routes are, what your evacuation plan is. All these things are now that you're aware of. We want you to implement them. We want you to go back there, and the more people that we can show this awareness to, everybody else will all have the eyes and ears of the Dubai Mall and the safety of Dubai Mall and the safety of you and the safety of the customers. So I'd like to thank you very much.